anyone states the obvious, I should have bailed out way before I did. I dated my last serious boyfriend for around 6 years, and throughout the whole of those 6 years I always received pokes off some fella on Facebook. I didn't think much of it, and we had like 30 friends in common, so I figured maybe I'd met him somewhere along the way. Besides, he was muscly and quite attractive, so having the additional attention was fun, I guess. A couple of weeks after my ex and I split, he privately messaged me asking if we could meet. We chatted for a while, and I eventually agreed to go for a meal with him. On first date terms, it was a pretty lovely one. Nice meal, walk under the stars, blah blah blah. After a few weeks of seeing him, I noticed little traits in his behaviour that I found to be particularly strange. He would never let me in his house and would leave me standing outside. One day I stood outside his house for 45 minutes at 10:30 PM as we'd walked there. I didn't know where the hell I was, and he had decided that I had given him the hump for no apparent reason. This is where I should have bowed out. The following Friday I figured I would give him the benefit of the doubt and invited him round. He stayed for 9 days. I had to text a friend asking her to pick me up and not to invite him just to get him out. I figured I would leave it now, until he turned up on the doorstep the next day. I told him I wasn't very well and that I had a pretty serious water infection, which was met with a lot of accusations of cheating and being called a slag. This was the final straw, and I told him to leave and not bother contacting me again. Every day I received text after text, missed call after missed call. I blocked him on Facebook, so he messaged all of my friends begging them to convince me to take him back. Hell no, I figured that after time he would back away. Things went quiet for a week. It was all bliss until I received a call off a number I don't know. It was him asking me who the man who had just walked into my front door was. By the way, it was my dad. This happened every time someone walked into my flat, male, female, black, white, anyone. Turned out that he knew someone who lived across the street from me, and he had his lovely girl watching my every move. Things calmed down again after speaking to the couple and explaining the grief that he had caused me. He told them that we were still together and he was concerned for my safety. And I thought someone had got the message until one day I had finished work and caught the bus home. I had this perfectly timed, so I'd always be pulling up to my estate at 6 PM. As I strolled down the hill to my estate, ready to cut through the alley for the garages, I noticed a figure tucked away in the shadows in a corner. It was him. I kept my head up and marched onwards to my front door. He followed the distance behind until I reached the door, and then ran after me and chased me up the stairs in my block of flats. I told him that I wasn't interested, that he was crazy, that he needed help, where he felt that maybe a hug would change my mind on the whole situation. After letting out a massive scream from my neighbour, he was escorted out of the building and was told that if he returned, it would probably be the last thing that he ever done. At least I have learnt now not to date people off Facebook and run a background check on any future partners. After reading many stories here, I never figured I'd experience something that belonged here. Today, after I walked home from school, I changed into my PJs and I browsed Let's Not Meet. Ironic, huh? Just like I do every single day. Well, about an hour later, I get a message on Facebook from a weird account telling me to go outside. After investigating, I realised he's messaged me before, only saying hi. So, half asleep, half stupid me figures, why not? I'm not home alone, nothing will happen to me, right? Wrong. I go outside and I see a tall guy with long hair and a Children of Bodom shirt on. I love COB, so I figured he used to go to my school, but graduated since he didn't look that much older than me. He looked really happy to see me, so I figured I did know him, but I just didn't remember him. I have a very bad memory, so I gave him a quick hug, but he hugged me a little longer. Okay, I said to myself, kinda weirded out by the whole situation. He then said, "Oh my god, you're so beautiful." I was like, hey, thanks. And he replied with, I was scared your Facebook pictures were going to be filtered. What the fuck? Around there I realised I had no idea who this guy was. He kept this firm grip on my hand. Come to my car, it's over there. He pointed to a little broken down red car at the end of my block. No, I have to take care of my sisters. I was completely alone. Come on, just for a while. He started pulling my arm and then alarm bells started screaming. No, I have to go. I pull free quickly and then turn to my house when he grabbed my wrists. Fuck. He mumbled something, then he grabbed my ass in a very tight grip. I'm 5'3" and he was like 6 foot something, so he was hovering over me. Then he said, let me lick your arsehole. I was like, what the fuck? I guess it was the flight or fight that kicked in, and I just squirmed until I broke loose. He grabbed my face and tried to kiss me, but I lightly punched his shoulder and told him to get the fuck away. Thankfully, my neighbour from across the street saw everything and screamed at him. He let me go and bolted it to his car and then sped off. My neighbour came over to me and asked if I was okay and walked me to my house and got me some water and called the police. All we could provide the police with is that he had a small red Honda and he had a COB shirt and long hair. They told me that they'd call me if they found him to let me know I'm safe, yet they haven't called. Still scared, still grateful my neighbour was home early and still have my sanity. I moved to South Korea for university when I turned 18. I'm now 21 and this happened to me over 2 years ago. Whilst there has definitely been some unwanted attention from some guys in the past, most of them get the message that I'm not interested. This, however, was a little more unsettling. The university I go to has an institute for language, which is where all of my classes were at the time, and it's pretty common knowledge that most foreigners in this part of Korea would know of or study at this institute. It's not abnormal for me to receive random Facebook friend requests from guys wanting to learn English or make foreign friends, and most of the time I just ignore them, unless we have a few mutual friends or I've met them before. I got a friend request from this guy named Nico, and we had a handful of mutual friends, and he'd messaged me saying he was sorry for the randomness of the request, but he was just trying to make as many foreign friends as he could. I thought, what the heck, and I accepted and messaged him back saying it was no bother. From what I could tell by his Facebook photos, he was heavily pierced and tattooed and stated he was Japanese, but had studied in Canada and could speak good English and also a foreigner studying at my university. After a few days he messaged me again and I replied, and it was a casual conversation and he would often bring up maybe meeting for a coffee or a movie, which I declined, until he started getting more aggressive for no reason. Every time I'd make a comment, he'd find some way to turn it into an argument, which grew tiring super fast, so I just ignored him. He'd often ask if I had a boyfriend, to which I'd reply no, and he'd bluntly say we should be together. It was at this point I decided I didn't really want anything to do with him anymore, so I politely declined on the basis I didn't know him, we'd never met, and that we hadn't even known each other for a week. He didn't take my refusal well and began throwing insults at me based on my looks and saying overly graphic things that he'd do to me if he ever saw me. Apparently I was being stupid not to take him up on his offer, because I'd never do better than him and he'd make me see that. It creeped me out beyond belief, so I just blocked and deleted him off Facebook and tried to forget about it. I mentioned it to a friend of mine and she immediately knew exactly who I was talking about. Apparently I was not the first girl he added on Facebook and tried to bully into meeting him and being his girlfriend. After asking a few more of my friends who we'd had mutual friends with on Facebook, and they all described pretty similar situations involving Nico. One girl even told me that she'd given him the benefit of the doubt and went and met him. And it turned out he didn't even go to our university, but actually lived over an hour away and would travel there daily, probably to watch and obsess over girls that he could find on Facebook next. He told her he was born in America and never been to Japan, yet he told me he was Japanese and studied in Canada. So who knows how much of what he actually said to anyone was actually true. I felt a little bit freaked out by this, but tried not to let it bother me. I'd never seen him around and I'd blocked him, so I forgot about it. That was until about a week or two later, I received a message from him on Facebook on another account, saying how that he'd seen me that day at school. This shook me up a bit, since I hadn't even considered that he might actually be watching me at school. I ignored the message and blocked the account. A few days later, I got numerous messages from different accounts claiming to be Nico's friends, saying how he had his account hacked and could I please unblock him to explain and we could talk about it. I ignored these messages too, but I kept receiving more, all of which I am pretty sure were just Nico himself trying to reach out to get my attention. The more I ignored them, the more violent and aggressive the messages became. I could tell that most of the time when he said that he'd seen me at school, he was lying. He'd say things like, "I saw you today at the library, all day you fucking slut. You're a fucking four-eyed slut who can't get laid," and other messages to that extent. I knew he was clutching at straws because I never used the school's library to study, and although I wear glasses, I never wear them in public. So I just kept blocking the accounts and tried not to let it bother me. I figured he'd just get bored of me soon enough and just let it go. Until one day, after class had finished and I was browsing the small convenience store in the building to grab a drink on my way home. I opened up the fridge to get a bottle of water, and when I closed the door, he was literally standing right beside me. He didn't say anything, he was just staring at me. I hadn't seen him in person before because I had never agreed to meet him, but I knew straight away it was him. And I freaked out. I dropped the bottle and I just left the store. I didn't walk home because I was afraid he'd follow me and find out where I lived. So I just went back into school and stayed around the areas where there were lots of people until a friend of mine came to meet me. After that, I saw him a handful of times when I'd leave class. He'd just be standing there doing nothing in particular, watching people as they walked past, and he'd stare at me intently. I made sure to always be with friends when I went to and from class and didn't go anywhere alone for a while. But after a week or so, the messages stopped and I didn't see him again. The last time I heard from him was about a year ago, when he messaged me on a new Facebook account asking if we could be friends again because he'd changed and it was all just a joke. Needless to say, I ignored the messages, blocked the account, and will not be taking him up on his offer being friends. So Nico, you creepy little stalker, let's not meet. Hey guys, thanks for listening and I hope you enjoyed. Just want to shout out to one of our fans on Instagram who's been showing a lot of love and support, Brett Williamson. Thank you for doing what you do on Instagram, and we'll be working to bring you another video very soon. But until then, don't have nightmares.